The millionaire needed a date to impress his family, but she ended up impressing his heart instead. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The ballroom of the Langston estate gleamed under 100 chandeliers, filled with the hum of laughter and champagne glasses clinking. But standing in the middle of it all, Adrian Langston, the 32-year-old CEO of Langston Group, felt absolutely nothing. He had the money, the looks, the power, and yet, the one thing his family cared about tonight was his relationship status. Adrian, his mother's sharp voice sliced through the chatter, you cannot attend another family gala alone. It makes you look detached. He forced a polite smile. Detached or independent? She raised an eyebrow. Unmarried, Adrian. That's what the headlines will say. You know how investors love gossip. His father, standing beside her, added in his usual calm tone, your grandmother's 80th birthday dinner is in 3 days. You're bringing someone. No excuses. Adrian exhaled. 3 days. 3 days to find someone believable enough to convince his family and every shareholder watching that he was not the lonely heir they whispered about. Later that night, in his penthouse overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Adrian loosened his tie and stared at the city lights below. His assistant, Peter, stood near the door holding a tablet. So, Peter began carefully, you want me to find you a date? Adrian turned around, deadpan. A respectable, presentable woman who can survive one night with my family. That's all. Peter nodded slowly. There's someone I know, a friend of my sister's. She's normal, not the type to chase headlines. Perfect, Adrian muttered. Set it up. The next morning, in a small downtown cafe that smelled of roasted beans and rain-soaked pavement, Emily Carter wiped her hands on her apron, staring at the help wanted sign she couldn't afford to ignore. Rent was due. Tips had been thin. When the man in the tailored suit walked in, she assumed he was lost. He looked too polished for this side of town. Emily Carter? He asked. She blinked. Yes, that's me. I'm Peter, he said with a friendly smile. My boss needs help with a social situation. It pays well. Social situation? She echoed. He needs someone to pretend to be his girlfriend for a few days. There's an NDA, payment up front, and… Wait, pretend? Emily's eyes widened. Like fake dating? Peter nodded. Exactly. Strictly business. No strings attached. Her first instinct was to laugh, but the words pays well lingered in her head like a lifeline. She'd been juggling rent, her mother's medical bills, and the dream of finishing art school someday. Maybe this was crazy. But maybe it was her only chance. That night, she met Adrian Langston in person. He stood by the window of his office, the skyline behind him glowing like liquid gold. Miss Carter, he greeted, voice smooth but detached. You've read the terms? I have, she said, clutching the folder Peter had handed her. You need a girlfriend. I need the paycheck. It's a win. Win. Adrian studied her. She wasn't like the women he usually met, no designer perfume, no rehearsed smiles. Just calm honesty and eyes that didn't flinch under pressure. Rule 1, he said, breaking the silence. This is business. We keep things professional. Rule 2, no personal questions. Rule 3, don't fall in love. Emily crossed her arms. Trust me, Mr. Langston, that won't be a problem. He almost smiled. Almost. We'll see, he murmured, signing the contract. Outside, the rain began to fall against the glass, and for the first time in years, Adrian felt something shift. It was supposed to be fake, but fate, as always, had other plans. The morning of the gala approached faster than either of them expected. Emily stood in front of the mirror of Adrian's penthouse guest room, staring at the transformation staring back. The woman in the reflection was not the cafe waitress she had been 3 days ago. Her hair, once a messy knot, now fell in soft curls around her shoulders. The pale blue gown she wore shimmered under the soft light, hugging her frame just enough to look elegant without trying too hard. She looked expensive, but still herself. Peter knocked on the door lightly before stepping in. You clean up well, he said with a teasing grin. You ready for a night with New York's most judgmental people? Emily laughed nervously. Ready as I'll ever be. Downstairs, Adrian adjusted his cufflinks, every movement calculated and deliberate. When Emily descended the stairs, his usual composure faltered for half a second. He was used to perfect women, used to polish and pretense, but the simplicity of her beauty caught him off guard. "You look professional," he managed. She arched an eyebrow. "That's your version of a compliment?" His lips curved slightly. "Take it as a high one." In the car ride to the Langston estate, silence filled the air between them, broken only by the low hum of the engine. Adrian finally spoke, his voice even. "Remember the key points. My parents believe we met through Peter's charity gala. We have been dating for 3 months. You are an art student on a scholarship. Keep your answers short, polite, and avoid mentioning work." Emily nodded, repeating the facts like lines from a play. "Got it. 3 months. Art scholarship. Met at a gala." Then she glanced at him sideways. "And what do I call you? Mr. Langston feels too formal if I am supposed to be your girlfriend." He hesitated before replying. "Adrian?" "Okay, Adrian," she said, testing the sound. It felt strange on her tongue, but somehow right. The Langston mansion loomed like a castle lit by gold and marble. Every guest dressed like they belonged in a magazine. The air buzzed with laughter, music, and unspoken judgment. As soon as they walked in, whispers began. That must be Adrian's mystery girlfriend. Finally brought someone, did he? Adrian's mother, elegant and commanding, approached with practiced warmth. "Adrian, darling," she said, kissing his cheek before turning to Emily. "And you must be Emily. Peter mentioned you." Her smile did not quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to the family." Emily extended a polite handshake. "Thank you, Mrs. Langston. It is an honor." The woman's gaze swept over her dress, her posture, even the way she held her glass. "You have good taste, dear," she said finally, the faintest edge in her tone. "Peter must have picked the dress." "Actually," Adrian interrupted, his arm subtly sliding around Emily's waist, "she chose it herself." His voice carried a quiet pride that surprised even him. For the rest of the evening, Emily played her part, perfectly smiling at the right moments, answering questions about art school, laughing when Adrian leaned in with a witty comment. But it was not all acting. Every time their eyes met across the table, there was a flicker of something unspoken, something that did not fit into any contract clause. As the night wore on, one of Adrian's cousins, smug and half-drunk, clinked his glass. "So, Emily," he said loudly, "what is it like dating a man like Adrian? Must be nice to skip straight to penthouse life." A few guests chuckled. Adrian's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Emily spoke calmly. "Actually, it is terrifying," she said, smiling sweetly. "He works too much, barely sleeps, and keeps forgetting to eat breakfast. But he is kind when no one is watching, and that is what matters to me." The laughter faded. Even Adrian's mother paused, surprised by the grace in Emily's tone. The cousin stammered, I was just kidding." "I know," Emily said softly. "So was I." When the dinner ended and the guests began to leave, Adrian found her standing on the terrace, looking up at the moon. "You handled that well," he said quietly. She shrugged. "I just told the truth." He studied her profile, the way the moonlight brushed her face. "You are very good at this." She looked at him then, her eyes steady. "Good at pretending?" "Good at being real," he said before he could stop himself. For a moment neither spoke. The air between them carried something fragile, something that felt dangerously close to real emotion. Finally, Emily smiled, a small, tired smile. "You should get some rest, Mr. Langston," she teased, using his last name on purpose. He chuckled under his breath. "Yes, Miss Carter." But as he watched her walk back inside, he knew something had shifted. The line between business and something else was beginning to blur, and no contract could stop what was quietly growing between them. The days following the gala felt strangely different. What was supposed to be a short-term performance had started to look a lot like a partnership. Adrian's family, particularly his grandmother, had taken an immediate liking to Emily. She had even invited Emily for Sunday brunch, something she rarely did with outsiders. "It has been years since I have seen Adrian smile during these events," the old woman said, squeezing Emily's hand warmly. "You are good for him, dear." Emily smiled politely, though inside she felt the weight of the lie pressing harder than ever. She reminded herself that it was temporary, just business, but each shared glance with Adrian made that truth harder to hold on to. On Monday morning, Adrian arrived at his office earlier than usual. His assistant, Peter, raised an eyebrow. "You have been in a better mood lately," he said. Adrian ignored the comment and opened his laptop. But when he saw Emily's name flash on his phone, just a quick thank you text for the weekend, he caught himself smiling again. That afternoon, as part of the ongoing act, he asked Emily to join him for a charity photo shoot arranged by the Langston Foundation. "It is just for show," he said, stepping out of the car as cameras flashed outside the Children's Art Center. "Smile, hold my hand, look like you belong here." Emily looked at him. "You make it sound like I do not." His gaze softened. "You do more than you know." The event went smoothly. Emily connected naturally with the volunteers, laughing with the staff and kneeling to admire the artwork displayed on the walls. One piece, a painting of a city skyline under rain, caught her eye. "This reminds me of home," she said quietly. Adrian watched her, noticing how her tone shifted when she talked about art, how her voice became alive. "You really love this, do you not?" She nodded. "Art was supposed to be my future, but then bills and rent happened." "What if it still could be?" he asked. She glanced at him, half smiling. "Are you offering me a scholarship, Mr. Langston?" "I am offering a thought," he said simply, "that maybe you deserve more than just surviving." Later that evening, as they drove back to the city, rain streaked the car windows just like the painting she had admired. The silence between them was not awkward this time. It was full of things neither of them dared to say. When the car stopped in front of her apartment, Emily hesitated. "You do not have to walk me up," she said softly. "I know," Adrian replied, but he stepped out anyway. At the door, she turned to face him. "You are not as cold as you pretend to be, you know." His lips curved slightly. "And you are not as simple as you think you are." She laughed, shaking her head. "Good night, Adrian." "Good night, Emily." When she disappeared behind the door, Adrian stood there for a moment longer, looking at the worn-out building. Something about her world felt real in a way his never had. The next morning, he found himself scrolling through her social media, small glimpses of her life, a coffee cup, a street mural, a blurry sunset. No luxury, no filters, just truth. Later that week, Emily arrived at his office for a follow-up meeting about the foundation event. She was wearing jeans and a simple white shirt, nothing fancy, but every head in the room turned as she walked in. Adrian's executive team was surprised. They had never seen him bring anyone like her into a meeting. "Miss Carter will be collaborating with us on the community outreach project," Adrian announced, his tone professional, but his eyes gleaming with something warmer. Emily blinked, confused. "I will?" He smiled. "You said you wanted a chance to do something that matters." It was spontaneous, impulsive, but it felt right. Over the next few days, they worked side by side, reviewing proposals and sketching plans for the Foundation's art initiative. Their conversations were half business, half laughter. Emily began to see the man behind the headlines, the one who made coffee for the staff when meetings ran late, the one who stayed behind to fix a broken projector instead of calling maintenance. One evening, after hours of work, she looked up from the table. "You know, for someone who claims not to care about people, you do a lot to prove otherwise." Adrian chuckled quietly. "Do not tell anyone. It would ruin my reputation." Their eyes met across the table, the soft desk lamp reflecting in both sets of eyes. Neither spoke for a long time. For the first time since their agreement began, the silence felt intimate. Neither of them wanted it to end. What had started as a contract was slowly, irreversibly becoming something else, something they could no longer hide behind rules or signatures. It had been almost 2 weeks since the gala, and what started as a staged partnership had now slipped into something dangerously natural. Adrian and Emily had fallen into a rhythm that neither of them had planned, but neither could escape. The mornings began with work meetings that turned into jokes, lunches that stretched too long, and evenings that ended with quiet talks about everything except the contract that had brought them together. One Friday night, Adrian invited her to an art exhibit hosted by one of his company's partners. "You should come," he said, standing by her desk as she looked over a stack of proposals. "It is for networking." "Networking or another performance?" she teased, not looking up. "A little of both," he admitted. When she arrived, dressed in a sleek black dress that contrasted beautifully with her bright eyes, Adrian found himself losing his composure again. "You are late," he said, trying to sound casual, but his tone betrayed the fact that he had been waiting. "I got lost in a room full of millionaires," she said, smiling, "but I found the only one who looks uncomfortable in a suit." He laughed under his breath, offering her his arm. "Then I suppose we can be lost together." The evening was a swirl of champagne glasses, polite laughter, and murmured compliments. For Emily, it was another world, one of polished manners and unspoken expectations. Yet she carried herself with quiet confidence, not trying to belong, just being herself. People noticed. So did Adrian. When a gallery owner approached and complimented Emily's insight about a painting, Adrian watched with something like pride. He had met countless women who chased attention, but Emily drew it naturally, effortlessly. Later that night, after the event, they found themselves walking along the quiet streets of Manhattan. The city hummed around them, but it felt distant. "You handled yourself well tonight," Adrian said. "You are good at this." She smiled faintly. "Pretending to fit in?" "No," he said. "Being you." She looked at him then, really looked, and for a moment the act vanished. "You know this is getting harder," she said softly. "What is?" "Pretending that this is not real." Her voice trembled slightly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Adrian stopped walking. The sound of traffic faded as he searched her face. "Emily," he began, but she shook her head, forcing a small smile. "Forget I said that. I know the rules, but the damage was done." For the rest of the walk, silence stretched between them, thick, heavy, filled with things neither of them dared to say. That weekend, Adrian's grandmother invited them both to her country estate for a family brunch. "Bring that lovely girl of yours," she had said over the phone. "She makes you more human." Emily hesitated but agreed. The estate was beautiful, surrounded by wide fields and old oak trees. Adrian's grandmother welcomed her with open arms, while his mother watched quietly, her sharp eyes missing nothing. During lunch, the family discussed business, investments, and legacy. Emily listened politely but added little until his grandmother asked, "Emily, what do you think Adrian's greatest strength is?" The table fell silent. Emily set down her glass. "He sees people," she said finally, "even when he pretends not to." His father chuckled. "That is generous. He hardly has time to see himself." "Maybe," she said smiling, "but he notices the small things. That is what makes a good leader." The room softened. Adrian's gaze lingered on her, his chest tightening with something new and unfamiliar. Later, when they walked through the garden, he finally said, "You did not have to defend me." "I was not defending you," she said. "I was telling the truth." He smiled slightly. "You always do." She looked at him, sunlight glinting through the trees behind him. "Adrian, what happens when this is over?" He paused, unsure how to answer. The contract, the plan, the boundaries, they suddenly felt meaningless. "I do not know," he admitted quietly. "But I am starting to wish it never had to end." For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the wind stirring the leaves around them. And though neither said it out loud, both knew the line between what was fake and what was real had already disappeared completely. The next week, Adrian found himself staring at his office window, lost in thought, replaying every moment from the weekend at his grandmother's estate. Emily's laughter still echoed in his head, the way she looked at him when she thought he was not watching, and how natural it had all felt. It was supposed to be a performance, yet it had turned into something real, something he could not categorize or control. Peter knocked on the door and walked in, holding a tablet. "You have a board dinner tonight at the Langston Tower," he reminded him. Adrian nodded absent-mindedly until Peter added, "Your family will be there, and they are expecting Emily." Adrian blinked. "Of course," he said, masking his hesitation. But as soon as Peter left, a strange unease filled him. He had not even asked her yet. When he called, Emily was in her small apartment, folding laundry while her cat meowed for attention. "A board dinner?" she asked, laughing softly. "I thought we were done performing." "We are," he said quickly, then paused. "But it would mean a lot if you came, just one last time." She hesitated for a moment before answering. "All right, one last time." That evening, Emily walked into the Langston Tower wearing a soft cream dress, simple but radiant. The moment she stepped out of the elevator, conversations dimmed. Everyone noticed her. Adrian felt a rush of pride he tried to hide behind a neutral smile. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "So do you," she replied, eyes glinting. The dinner began smoothly. They laughed, they smiled, they played their parts perfectly. But as the evening went on, Adrian's rival and former college friend, Marcus Reed, joined the table. Marcus was sharp-tongued, ambitious, and never missed a chance to stir trouble. "Adrian," Marcus said with a smirk, "your girlfriend is quite the mystery. No one seems to know much about her background." "That is because it is private," Adrian replied evenly. Marcus leaned back. Private or invented? I mean, she appeared out of nowhere. Convenient timing, do you not think? The table grew tense. Adrian's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Emily spoke up. Maybe the mystery is why he likes me, she said calmly, smiling at Marcus. After all, mystery keeps powerful men humble. A few guests chuckled, easing the tension. Adrian glanced at her with quiet admiration. She had saved him again, effortlessly. But Marcus was not done. So, Emily, he continued, feigning politeness, tell us where you studied art. Perhaps we have some mutual friends. Emily froze. The truth was that she had never finished her degree. Life, bills, and circumstances had taken that away. She opened her mouth to respond, but Adrian cut in. Enough, Marcus, he said sharply. You are out of line. Marcus smirked. Just making conversation. The dinner ended shortly after, but the mood had shifted. In the car ride home, silence stretched between them. Emily finally said, he is right, you know. I do not belong in that world. Adrian turned to her. You belong wherever you decide to stand. She shook her head. You do not understand. To them, I am just a convenient story, the girl who makes the rich man look good. You are not a story, he said quietly. You are the only real thing in my life right now. She looked at him, her chest tightening. Then why does it still feel like an act? He did not answer. When they arrived at her apartment, she opened the car door slowly. Thank you for everything, Adrian, she said softly. For giving me a glimpse of a world I will never have. Emily, wait, he started. But she was already gone, the door closing gently behind her. That night, Adrian could not sleep. Her words echoed in his head, mixing with his own fears. He had built his life on control, order, and reputation, but this what he felt for her defied all of that. He picked up his phone more than once, wanting to call her, but each time he stopped himself. Somewhere across the city, Emily lay awake too, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that walking away was the right choice. She told herself it had always been temporary, that she had known the rules from the start, but the ache in her chest told a different story. It was no longer a game. It was heartbreak disguised as duty. Days passed in silence. The contract that had once defined them now felt like a ghost haunting every corner of Adrian's penthouse. He buried himself in work, attending meetings, approving projects, pretending that everything was normal, but nothing felt the same. Every time he glanced at his phone, he half expected to see her name. But Emily was gone. Across the city, she returned to her old life at the cafe, trying to lose herself in routine. The sound of coffee grinders and clinking cups filled her days, but her heart felt heavier with every passing hour. Her coworker, Maya, noticed. You have been quiet lately, she said, sliding a cup toward her. Emily forced a smile. Just tired. But even as she said it, she caught herself staring out the window, watching couples walk by hand in hand, wondering if Adrian was thinking of her too. One rainy evening, Adrian attended a corporate charity dinner, the kind of event that used to feel effortless. But now, surrounded by polished smiles and empty conversations, he felt nothing but exhaustion. Marcus, ever the opportunist, appeared again with a smug grin. Where is your mysterious girlfriend tonight, Adrian? Or was she just part of the performance? Adrian's patience snapped. Watch your mouth, he said sharply. The people around them fell silent. Marcus smirked. Come on, Adrian. We all know she was a prop. The poor girl probably could not handle your world. Adrian's fist clenched. She handled it better than any of you ever could, he said, voice low but steady. Without another word, he turned and walked out into the rain, leaving the whispers behind. That night, he drove aimlessly through the city until he found himself parked outside the cafe where she worked. Through the fogged-up window, he saw her wiping tables, her hair tied back, a tired look in her eyes. Something inside him cracked. The next morning, Emily was surprised to see him waiting outside when she arrived for her shift. He stood there, drenched from the drizzle, holding a single cup of coffee. You should not be here, she said quietly. I know, he replied, but I could not stay away. She crossed her arms. What do you want, Adrian? To talk, he said simply. To explain. She sighed but nodded toward the small bench outside. They sat there, the sound of rain tapping softly on the awning. I owe you an apology, Adrian began. I should have protected you from people like Marcus. I should have told them the truth. And what truth is that? she asked. He looked at her, eyes tired but sincere. That it stopped being fake a long time ago. Emily froze, her breath catching. Adrian, you do not have to say anything, he said quickly. I just need you to know that what I felt, what I feel, it is real. I do not care about the contract, the image, the headlines. None of it means anything without you. She looked at him, rain misting around them, and for a moment she wanted to believe every word, but fear tugged at her heart. You live in a world where people like me do not last, she said softly, and you deserve someone who fits. I do not want someone who fits, he said, voice steady. I want someone who feels. For a moment, neither spoke. The city noise faded into the background, leaving only the quiet rhythm of rain. Emily finally whispered, You are impossible. Adrian smiled faintly. So are you. Then, for the first time since that night, she laughed. It was small, uncertain, but real. I cannot promise anything, she said. I am not asking for promises, he replied. Just a chance to start without pretending. She hesitated, then nodded. One step at a time, she said. One step at a time, he repeated. As they stood under the soft drizzle, the tension that had once kept them apart began to dissolve. It was not a grand confession or a perfect moment. It was simple, honest, human. And for Adrian Langston, the man who had built his empire on control, that simplicity felt like the most extraordinary thing in the world. For a while, things finally seemed to settle between them. Adrian and Emily found a quiet rhythm that felt almost like peace. They saw each other in the in-between moments, early morning coffees before his meetings, late-night walks after her shifts. The pretense had vanished, and what replaced it was something fragile yet real. But peace never lasted long in Adrian's world. One Thursday afternoon, Peter rushed into his office, face pale. Adrian, you need to see this, he said, handing him a tablet. On the screen was a headline splashed across every major news outlet. Langston CEO's fake girlfriend exposed. There were photos of Adrian and Emily, details about her job at the cafe, and even comments questioning her intentions. Someone had leaked everything. Adrian's stomach dropped. Who did this? He demanded. Peter hesitated. Marcus Reed's PR team is behind it. They got a hold of the old contract draft. It is everywhere now. Adrian's heart pounded as he stood, rage and guilt twisting inside him. Call my lawyers, he said through clenched teeth, and find Emily before the press does. But he was too late. When he arrived at the cafe, reporters were already outside, shouting her name, cameras flashing. Emily was nowhere in sight. Later that night, she finally answered his call, her voice breaking. Adrian, they showed up at my apartment. They know everything. My manager asked me not to come back to work. They think I used you. Emily, listen to me, he said desperately. I am fixing this. You cannot fix this, she whispered. This was my life, and now it is gone. You do not understand what it is like to lose everything. Then let me help you, he pleaded. Please, do not run from me. There was a pause, a shaky breath, then silence. She hung up. For the first time in years, Adrian Langston felt powerless. The next morning, tabloids feasted on the story. Billionaire's love hoax, one headline read. Waitress or gold digger, said another. His board demanded answers, his investors panicked, and his mother called with thinly veiled anger. You have embarrassed the family, she hissed. You brought a scandal into our name. I brought honesty, Adrian replied coldly. Something this family has not seen in a long time. He hung up before she could respond. Hours later, standing in front of a sea of cameras at a press conference, Adrian took a deep breath. You've all read the headlines, he began. And yes, Emily Carter entered my life through a business arrangement. But what began as a performance became something real. She is not a liar. She is the most genuine person I have ever met. If anyone has to take the blame, it is me. The room erupted with questions, flashes, chaos, but Adrian no longer cared. Across the city, Emily watched the broadcast from a friend's apartment, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time, she realized he had chosen her over everything else, his image, his power, even his pride. And though her heart ached, one thing was certain. This was no longer just his fight. It was theirs. The week after the press conference was the longest of Adrian's life. His phone never stopped ringing, and every news outlet demanded another statement, but he did not care about the headlines anymore. All he wanted was to see Emily, to tell her that he meant every word he had said on that stage. For days, she did not answer his calls. Then, one evening, he received a message with a single line, "Meet me at the old art studio on 5th. He drove there immediately. The studio was quiet, filled with the faint smell of paint and dust. Emily stood near a canvas, her back to him, wearing an old sweatshirt splattered with colors. "You kept this place?" he said softly. She nodded without turning. "It is the only place I could still be myself." He took a slow step forward. "Emily, I am sorry for everything. I should have protected you from all of this." She finally turned to face him, eyes tired but steady. "Why did you do it, Adrian? You could have denied everything. It would have been easier." "Because I was done pretending," he said. "For the first time, I wanted to be honest about you, about us. I was afraid of losing my reputation, but losing you was worse." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of deceit, but there was none. "You really meant it," she whispered. "Every word," he replied. "I do not care what they think. You are the only truth in my life." Tears welled in her eyes as she shook her head. "You do not get to say that after everything." He stepped closer. "Then tell me what to do. Tell me how to make this right." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she reached for the canvas beside her and uncovered a painting. It was a portrait of him, not the powerful CEO, but the man behind the mask, the one she had seen when no one else did. "You already did," she said quietly. "You showed them the truth." He exhaled, emotion breaking through his voice. "Does that mean you forgive me?" Emily smiled faintly. "It means I believe you." He took her hands gently. "Then let us start over. No contracts, no lies, no walls." She hesitated, then nodded. "Start over," she repeated. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the windows as if blessing their new beginning. The world could say what it wanted. For the first time, both of them were free to be real. 6 months later, the Langston Foundation held its annual charity gala. And this time, the story was very different. There were no whispers, no rumors, only applause as Adrian stepped onto the stage with Emily beside him. The world had moved on from the scandal, but what mattered was that they had not moved on from each other. Adrian looked out over the crowd, then turned to Emily. "Last year," he said into the microphone, "I stood on this stage pretending to have everything. Tonight I am standing here because I finally found what really matters." He paused, his eyes softening. "This foundation is about hope, about giving second chances, and I would not understand that if not for the woman standing next to me." The audience watched in silence as Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. "Adrian," he smiled gently, "you once told me that love and art were about honesty. So here it is, my truth. I love you, Emily Carter. Will you marry me?" The room erupted in cheers and applause as Emily covered her mouth, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. 1,000 times yes. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, and the lights above seemed to glow brighter. Later that night, as they danced beneath the chandeliers, he leaned close and whispered, "No contracts this time." She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Just forever," she said. Outside, snow began to fall softly against the city skyline, and for once, neither of them felt out of place. The millionaire who had once needed a fake date had finally found something real, and for both of them, it was the best deal they had ever made.